A body was just found in a barrel in Lake Mead dating back 40 years, and it's believed we're gonna find a lot more. The lake is having the worst drought in 1,200 years, and so when this body was originally dumped, it could have been under 200 feet of water. For reference, Lake Mead is just outside of Las Vegas, meaning that it has been a dumping ground for mob activity for decades. Around the time the body was dumped, the most prevalent gang in Las Vegas was actually the Hole in the Wall gang, led by Frank Culata. Frank actually died in 2020, so if his gang was responsible for this death, we may never know. The police think that the body was dumped in the 70s or early 80s, and that the person died from a gunshot wound before being placed in the barrel. They were actually able to date the body because they found Kmart shoes sold around that time inside of the barrel. According to police reports, about 1 or 2 bodies are found per year inside of Lake Mead, so if this is drying up this fast, we might be about to find a lot more. A prisoner and a prison guard in Alabama just escaped together, leaving many to wonder if it was planned or if she was kidnapped. So last Friday, Casey White and Vicky White disappeared from an Alabama jail. Vicky was bringing Casey to a courthouse for a routine mental health check, but they have not been seen since. For reference, Casey was actually in jail for a crime spree he committed in 2015, and while he was in jail, he also confessed to the murder of a 58-year-old woman, also in 2015. So there's actually reason to believe that the two were in a relationship at the time of the disappearance. Vicky was giving Casey preferential treatment in the prison and also may have had him specifically transferred to her prison so they could be together. Vicky also was set to retire the day of the disappearance and had just sold her house for way under market value. Casey, on the other hand, claimed that if he ever got out of prison, he would kill his ex-girlfriend and his ex-girlfriend's sister, and now he has access to Vicky's weapons. Personally, I think that Casey got Vicky to fall in love with him so that she would help him escape. And he feels really dangerous, so hopefully both of them are found within the next couple days. Hello everyone. Today we have a video of someone walking through an abandoned hospital, which I'm too scared to watch. Okay. Okay, what was that? Okay, one more time with my head out of the way. I'm sorry, but that looks like a straight up demon. See if you can spot the ghost in this abandoned insane asylum in the UK. One more time in case you missed it. Oh my god. At first I thought maybe they got one of their friends to go in and pretend, but that looks ghostly. Well, another body has been found in Lake Mead, the second in a week. Didn't I say this was just the beginning? To recap, Lake Mead is drying up at unprecedented rates since the area where it sits is having the worst drought in 1,200 years. And on top of that, Lake Mead is right next to Vegas, meaning for the last couple decades, it's been a dumping ground for the mob. And last week, a barrel was found washed up with a body from the 70s inside of it. There was not much left of the body that was just found, so determining the cause of death is going to be really hard on this one. But like I said in my last video about Lake Mead, this could still just be the beginning. Hi everyone, welcome to a new series called Celebrities You Didn't Know Were Kidnapped. Today we're going to be talking about the not very well-known kidnapping of Jessica Alba. Now, this is not something that Jessica's talked about publicly, but when she was 15 years old, she was kidnapped from set from her first ever show, Flipper. The story goes that Jessica was filming in Miami when she started receiving weird phone calls. She didn't really think much of it because she figured it was just a fan that got her number. The specific details have never been released, but we know that Jessica was taken for 14 hours and found tied up and blindfolded in the trunk of a car. When she was found, she wasn't able to recount a lot of the details to the police, but also she was severely traumatized and it sounds like she was blindfolded for a lot of it. In general, though, this is just kind of a small part of Jessica's dark past. She was raised in a really religious community that completely shamed her for her looks. Like basically being told it was her fault that older men were looking at her because she was just too pretty. This is just the first of a few stories we're gonna tell though, so follow along for more. Hi dolls, welcome back to the series Celebrities You Didn't Know Were Kidnapped. Today we're gonna be talking about the bizarre kidnapping of Frank Sinatra's son, Frank Sinatra Jr. So Frank Sinatra Jr. was just 19 years old in 1963, and he was an up-and-coming singer, probably wanting to be like his dad. He was performing at a lodge in Tahoe when two men approached his room saying that they were delivering a package. Within minutes, the men had tied up the singer's friend and blindfolded Frank Jr., leading him out a side door into a car. The singer's friend was able to untie himself pretty quickly, but by that point, Frank Jr. was already in a car heading 400 miles south to LA with the kidnappers. So these are the two guys that kidnapped him, and this guy, John Irwin, was the one that called Frank Sinatra Sr. that night, demanding $240,000 for his son's return. And to put that in perspective, that's like $2.2 million today. The FBI oversaw the transaction, and Frank Jr. was released after the ransom was paid. But it kind of gets a little weirder after that. So a lot of people still today think that this was just a publicity stunt because one of the kidnappers, Barry Keenan, knew the Sinatras and was like close with the family. He was Nancy Sinatra's friend at UCLA, and he saw this as an opportunity to borrow money from Frank Sinatra, fully intending to pay it back one day after he opened a business. He went to jail for 4 years for the kidnapping, but is still alive today and started a really successful real estate business and is worth millions of dollars. He also talks very publicly and often about the kidnapping. Stay tuned for more stories. Hello, and welcome back to Celebrities You Didn't Know Were Kidnapped. So this is actually one of the scariest celebrity kidnapping stories I've ever heard. Today we're talking about Justin Long. This story takes place in 2007 when Justin was filming a movie in Birmingham, Alabama. Justin was out at a local bar after filming with some of the crew when he was approached by two local men. The men offered to take Justin and the production assistants to a casino, but insisted that they all drive together in their car. Justin actually didn't think much of this and agreed to go with them, but first wanted to go back to his hotel room to get some more money to gamble with. So he goes, grabs the money, gets back in the car with the guys, and the guys say that they need to make a pit stop at their house. And while they're at the house, one of them offers Justin some weed, and he takes one hit and realizes it's not weed. He starts immediately feeling like he's losing control of his body, and when he offers it back to the men, they don't want to smoke it. And it's at this point, too, that another man comes out of one of the rooms, goes, "That's the guy," grab the camera, and then they're all back in the car again. At this point, Justin's at least with it enough to know that they're not bringing him back to his hotel, even though he's begging them to. At one point, they actually drive him to the hotel, but don't let him get out and then drive away from it, sort of to taunt him or to try to calm him down or something. He knows that things are starting to look really dire and gets this overwhelming sense that he is going to die. So what he does next is he opens the car door going 30 miles an hour and jumps out of it. And actually, he's so clumsy as he does it, he falls under the car and the car runs over his leg. But he's actually able to still get up and flag down the next car that drives by, which just happened to be a cab. The PAs that he was with were also let go at this point, and to this day he has nerve damage, but obviously it could have been so much worse. Make sure you're following along for more in this series. Hi guys, welcome back to the series Celebrities You Didn't Know Were Kidnapped. Today we're talking about a highly requested one. This is the kidnapping of Benedict Cumberbatch. So in 2004, Benedict was filming in South Africa, a show for the BBC. So on the weekends, him and his castmates would go out and scuba dive, but this one particular weekend, Benedict wasn't feeling very well and he wanted to go home early. This would have required the group to leave at night, and the South African local that was with them said that leaving at night wasn't a great idea because the roads get really sketchy, but they ultimately decided to leave that very evening. As they're traveling back to set, they blow a tire and have to pull over to the side of the road and change it. And that's when a group of armed men storm out of the brush and completely ambush the group. It was a 2.5-hour ordeal that included bringing all of the actors to an ATM to pull out a bunch of cash. At one point, one of the assailants actually put Benedict in the trunk of the car, but he was able to talk his way out of it. He claimed that he would probably die in the trunk, and that was going to be way too much of a hassle for the assailants. So they pull Cumberbatch out of the trunk, tie the group together, and take off. And at that point, the actors are able to kind of make their way down the road and find someone to help them. And then the next day, they found out that someone that very night actually died in a very similar attack. So for how absolutely terrible the situation was, it could have been a lot worse. Make sure you're following along for more in this series. So this week it came out that Kristin Chenoweth was almost a victim of the Girl Scout murders. This is going to be part of a new series called Close Encounters about people who narrowly escaped a horrible fate, so follow along for more. Some quick backstory is in 1977, 3 girls were found murdered on their first night at Girl Scout camp in Oklahoma. They were all staying in a tent together, and their bodies were found on the trail leading to the camp showers. Now, in 1977, there was no way to test for DNA evidence, but a local man, Gene Leroy Hart, had actually escaped prison and was on the run. He was arrested for the murders but was acquitted by a jury. There was actually a note found on the campgrounds 2 months earlier that said, "We are on a mission to kill 3 girls in Tent 1, but that note was discarded by the camp director, thinking it was a prank. Now, Broadway actress Kristen Chenoweth was actually supposed to be on that trip. She fell ill that weekend and was unable to go, but she says that it's haunted her entire life. So it wasn't until this year, 45 years after the murders took place, that we might finally have enough DNA evidence to convict Gene Leroy Hart. He passed away in 1979, but this might at least give some closure to the families. Hulu just released a documentary called Keeper of the Ashes about this entire event. Let me know if you're going to watch this weekend. Have you heard of the singer who narrowly escaped Ted Bundy? This is part of a series called Close Encounters, people who just barely escaped a terrible fate, so follow along for more. So Debbie Harry is the iconic singer from the band Blondie, and one night in 1970, before she was even famous, she was out late at night walking by herself in Manhattan. And that's when she was approached by an attractive man in a white Volkswagen Beetle. Sound familiar? She said she got a bad feeling from the man and said no, but he was pretty persistent. And she had been walking a while and her feet were hurting and she was tired, so eventually she kind of just gave in and got in the car. She quickly realized that something was not right with this car. The backseat had no window cranks and no handles, like there was no way for her to get out of the car. She starts panicking, but she has the wherewithal to reach her arm out of the open window and open the car door from the outside. But the man driving sees her do this, so he speeds up and takes a really sharp corner, throwing her out of the car onto the street. Years later, during the Ted Bundy trial, Debbie Harry was watching TV and immediately recognized him. Some people are skeptical and say that Ted Bundy might have been in Florida when Debbie reported seeing him, but all of these years, Debbie has remained steadfast in the fact that it was definitely him that picked her up, and all of the details she has noted about the car have been spot on. Bundy went on to confess to the murder of 30 women, but a lot of people think that number is a lot higher. So thank God she got out of that car. Would you buy this scary abandoned house with your friends? The Carlton Island Villa in upstate New York has been abandoned since 1927. And on top of that, its original owner, William Wyckoff, died the very first night he stayed in the house. But it's currently on sale for only $375,000, which in this economy is a steal. It's on the water. Some photos of the original layout still exist, and it's crazy to see how this turned into this, or how this became this. But if you're a millennial who doesn't know how you'll ever be able to afford a house, this might be the best chance you have. Sure, it needs some work, but just start a TikTok renovating this place. I'm sure it'll blow up and pay for itself. So send this to a friend that you would go in on splitting this with. Okay, wait till you see this creepy Zillow listing. So this house in South Carolina is being sold for $130,000 in 2017. But look at this caveat. Upstairs apartment cannot be shown under any circumstances. Buyer assumes responsibility for the month-to-month tenancy of the upstairs apartment. Occupant has never paid and no security deposit is being held, but there is a lease in place. Yes, it does not make any sense. Please don't bother asking. So basically there's a squatter upstairs. Someone else also pointed out that it looks like there's water damage from a leak coming from the mysterious upstairs tenant. This photo is also posted with the listing, and I'm gonna assume that's paint just so I can sleep tonight. So would you buy a house for under market value if it meant that the Babadook was living upstairs rent-free? This is one of many creepy homes we're gonna investigate, so make sure you're following along. So I am living for scary Zillow listings, and listen to these terrifying home buying experiences. So this couple was buying a foreclosed home in Geneva, Illinois when they saw this on the wall. Do not buy this house. It is haunted, by 2 ghosts. 2 women, they hate men. Property built on graveyard, and this is a 1875, I cannot read that next part. The other properties, everyone has, I think that word is divorced. Please do not acquire if you are married. Awful things will happen to you. The couple ended up not buying that home, but it sounds like it was haunted by 2 roommates that make you leave your husband. And I can't tell if that message is more or less creepy than this next one that another couple found in a house. A couple found this written on the basement door, but it says, "Hi, my name is Jim and I will die in 2012. The couple also didn't buy this house, but if Jim died 10 years ago, I mean, in this market, you really can't be picky. So this murdered Texas couple's missing baby has finally been found after 42 years. And the story is crazy. Let's take a look. So in 1981, Dean Klaus, his wife Tina Lynn, and their baby Holly disappeared without a trace in East Texas. The only clue was from an anonymous caller who said that he had found Dean's car in California. And he claimed that 3 women in white robes drove it from Texas to California. Police were actually able to track down one of the women who called herself Sister Susan, and she claimed that Dean had joined a cult and renounced all earthly possessions. And she wouldn't tell them anything else. It actually wasn't until late last year that human remains found around the same time were confirmed to be Dean and Tina's. Dean had been beaten to death and Tina had been strangled. But that didn't answer what happened to Holly. This year, investigators were searching for human remains around where Dean and Tina were found. And that's when they got a genetics hit that Holly was alive and in Oklahoma. But get this, when they were talking to Holly, they found out that she had been left on the steps of a church in Arizona by none other than 3 women in white robes. Investigation is still pending, and they are really trying to figure out who these white-robed women are. But for now, at least we know that Holly is alive and well. An almost 70-year-old unserved warrant has been found in the Emmett Till case, meaning an arrest might finally be made. Let's look at the details. A lot of us know the case. So in 1955, Carolyn Bryant Donham accused 14-year-old Emmett Till of whistling at her and identified him to the men who later went on to lynch him. There was an arrest warrant for Carolyn, but sheriffs at the time didn't want to bother her or her small children. And the warrant went missing. That is until this week when a private search party headed by Deborah Watts, who's a cousin of Emmett Till and the head of the Emmett Till Legacy Foundation, found it in an unmarked box in a Mississippi courthouse. No arrests have ever been made in the lynching, but Carolyn is still alive. She's 80 years old, she lives in North Carolina, and she's never spoken publicly about the event. If the warrant can still legally be served to her, that would be huge, but even if it can't, this might be enough evidence to finally arrest her. Welcome to a new series called Celebrities with Cult Ties. Today we're talking about Tom Cruise, Scientology, and the girlfriend they basically held hostage for him. So in 2004, the Scientologists held auditions for a fake movie with the goal of finding a new girlfriend for Tom Cruise after his divorce from Nicole Kidman. Actresses would show up thinking they were auditioning for a real movie, but then be asked weird questions like, what do you think of Tom Cruise? That's how it was decided that Nazanin Boniadi was actually going to be Tom's new girlfriend. She was already a Scientologist, which they liked, but they made her do insane things. She apparently wore braces before she was dating Tom, and they made her take them off early. She also already had a boyfriend who she was planning on marrying, but they showed her recordings of his private auditing sessions in order to get her to break up with him. Auditing is like therapy coupled with Catholic confession where they ask you really invasive questions. I would know. I got audited one time. For the first 3 weeks they dated, she was not allowed to see anyone, not even her parents. And if she said something Tom didn't like, he would send her to get audited. It was reported that she would spend up to 3 hours a day with auditors purging her negative thoughts about Tom. The relationship was really short-lived because she actually ended up offending David Miscavige, the head of the Scientology organization, while she was dating Tom. And they sent another Scientologist to break up with her on behalf of Tom because he couldn't even see her. After that, they sent her to Scientology jail down in Florida, where her punishment was to scrub bathrooms on her hands and knees with a toothbrush and to dig ditches in the middle of the night. Nazanin went on to leave Scientology, and I imagine is living a much better life for it, but this gives a lot of context to his other relationships.
Erupted in such this far away.
We're talking about celebrities that have ties to cults, and today we're talking about Elvis Presley and his time at the Self-Realization Fellowship. The Self-Realization Fellowship is a non-denominational spiritual hub in Los Angeles that focuses on meditation and yoga, and Elvis would get pretty involved with it whenever he'd come to LA. Actually so involved that he became friends with the president, Daya Mata, and even told her that he wanted to start his own commune and eventually become a spiritual leader within the organization. But let's take a look at what the organization was actually teaching. The fellowship was started by Paramahansa Yogananda, who's actually credited with bringing yoga to the West in the early 1900s. And he unfortunately had some cult leader-esque qualities about him. Yogananda believed he was a god. He thought he had the same consciousness as Krishna and Jesus Christ, which that's basically chapter 1 in the Cult Leader Handbook, and if anyone tells you they're a god, run. Yogananda also told his followers that his yoga was scientifically proven to stop your body's decay and progress your natural evolution. Which, later on in Elvis's life, as his mental and physical health started declining, I can understand the appeal. I started circulating about Yogananda's inappropriate conduct with young girls, and it was pretty well known that very young Mormon girls were leaving their religion to come study at the fellowship. Which is actually also the story with Dayamata, as she was only 14 years old when she joined. It was also said that the initiation for these young girls was very inappropriate, involving hot tubs, scantily clad minors, and lots of inappropriate touching. Yogananda died over 10 years before Elvis even joined the organization, so it's unclear how much of this he actually knew when he was becoming a part of it. And later in his life, Elvis's spirituality was all over the place. His bodyguard even came out and said that Elvis at one point thought he had superpowers. Ultimately, he never became a leader within the Self-Realization Fellowship, but he stayed in contact with Dayamata until he passed away. Hey, this looks like a nice house. Look at how big that yard is. Let's look at the Zillow listing. This is an estate and is being sold as is, not for the faint of heart. No, that's not a good sign. Buyers must assume responsibility for removal of all contents. Oh God, what's in there? Do not open garage door, front door, or back door. That's not leaving a lot of entrances. Well, now I gotta see what's inside. Oh no. Oh God, this is so much worse than what I thought it was gonna be. I thought as is meant that there was gonna be like black mold or bad wallpaper or something. There's also a lot of emphasis on the floors and not a lot of emphasis on the ceiling, which is never a good sign. Yeah, see how they intentionally leave the ceilings out of all the photos? But honestly, I've watched a lot of hoarders and this isn't even like top 10 worst for that show. Look at this trash pile as an opportunity to decorate a nursery. Less than $400,000 in New Hampshire? In this economy, I might do it. Two separate universities have made a discovery which might prove the existence of the Loch Ness Monster. Tales of the Loch Ness Monster have been around for 1,500 years, but evidence has been scarce. Some people believe that it's a stray plesiosaurus that somehow made it from dinosaur times and lives in the Loch Ness. But a big hole in this theory has always been that plesiosauruses lived in saltwater, not freshwater. And the Loch Ness is all freshwater, baby. But that's until today, when the bones of a plesiosaurus were found in an ancient Moroccan river that was totally freshwater. Though this doesn't prove the existence of the Loch Ness Monster, it does disprove the theory that a Loch Ness Monster would have died in the Loch Ness due to the fresh water. But what do you think? Is the Loch Ness Monster an ancient myth or a modern-day dinosaur? Let's take a closer look at one of Marilyn Monroe's final public appearances. On May 19, 1962, Marilyn Monroe wore the dress to sing Happy Birthday to JFK.
Happy birthday, Mr. President.
But there's actually quite a bit to unpack here. For one, she was introduced at the event as the late Marilyn Monroe, which at the time people chalked it up to the fact that she was known to be late to every single social event, but seems kind of weird when you realize that months later she would pass away tragically. Also, Marilyn and JFK were having an affair at the time. Also, this is the only picture ever taken of the two of them together. People took this performance as basically proof that she and JFK were sleeping together, and conspiracy theorists afterwards believed that maybe the JFK camp had something to do with her death. But Marilyn died of an overdose of sleeping pills, and actually while she was at the event for JFK, she was fired from the movie she was on because it was known that her opiate addiction had been getting worse. But when Marilyn's body was ultimately found, her hand was draped across the phone next to her bed, leaving many to wonder if she was trying to call JFK. Another day, another Zillow nightmare. But surely this one can't be that bad. Look at all this yard space you have, and look at that nice wraparound porch. Let's look at the listing. I mean, first and foremost, it has a pending offer, so it must be good enough for someone. This home could be brought back to like new condition with complete mitigation of mold and mildew. Needs walls, ceilings, and flooring, I mean, what other parts of the house are there, removed and replaced. Okay, let's take a look. Oh, they weren't kidding. Look at the mold on all of the walls. I mean, I like that they included the box of the TV, like, look, a TV could go here. Oh, Jesus Christ. I mean, this is in Montana, so I imagine it's what happens when you abandon a home in a place with seasons. How did they take pictures of this? Like, the person taking pictures must have been in a full hazmat suit. I mean, listen, if you wanted to buy a house just to burn it down, $20,000 is not that steep. More human remains were found in the rapidly drying Lake Mead. And investigators are worrying that time is running out on finding any clues. Of the 3 sets of remains found, the one that looks the most like foul play was the one found in this barrel. If you don't remember, in May, investigators found a body inside of this barrel, maybe from the late 70s or early 80s, and we know that there was a gunshot wound. And these remains are being found as Lake Mead has been rapidly drying over the last few decades. What's really interesting though is because Lake Mead used to be so deep, the bottom was so cold that bodies wouldn't decompose there. Or at least would decompose very slowly, and so 2 of the bodies still have organ tissue on them. But investigators are worried because for a person that was thrown in the lake in the late 70s, witnesses to that event are getting very old. And that's also when in Vegas, which is right next to Lake Mead, the mob had a total stronghold on the area. So a lot of witnesses might just not want to talk. It seems like it's a race against the clock to find any answers on this, but hopefully we start learning something soon. Okay, so someone sent me this Zillow nightmare and I am so excited to share it with everyone. Before we get into the listing, I would like to draw everyone's attention to the sticker price, and that is $250,000. But let's look at what they have to say. Calling all investors, red flag. Cash hard money offers only, $250,000. And that gets paired nicely with do not enter, all caps, 3 exclamation points, cannot be safely shown. Let's take a look. Okay, so I know what you're thinking. Kaylin, that looks like a shed. Yes, but maybe it's gonna wow us with the interior. Okay, so yeah, it doesn't do that either. Some of these pictures are confusing because it's like, what am I learning about the space in this photo? Am I learning that the world's largest spider lives in here? And the same goes for this one. This is just trash on the floor. The housing market in LA right now is just so dire. And the most laughable part of all of this is that on the website, it says we estimate this home will sell faster than 99% of the nearby homes. But this is easily going to take tens of thousands of dollars to repair on top of buying it. What started as a missing hikers case turned into one of the strangest unsolved mysteries. Kenny Veach was hiking near Nellis Air Force Base when he claimed that he found a cave shaped like an M. And for some quick context, Nellis Air Force Base is just south of Area 51. Veach claimed to his YouTube followers that as he got closer to the cave, his body started vibrating, so much so that he ran away in terror. But he told his followers he was going to come back and try to film what he saw. Only Veach has never been seen again since he tried to go back. His cell phone was found near a vertical mine shaft, but no other remnants have ever been found. Years later, a woman claiming to be Veach's girlfriend commented on the video that she actually believes that Kenny went into the desert to take his own life. To this day, all search parties have come back with nothing, and no one's ever talked about seeing the M Cave since. Some people don't know the university they went to is actually haunted, as is the case with Cal State Channel Islands, one of the most haunted universities in America. That's because from 1933 to 1997, it was actually the Camarillo State Hospital, a mental asylum. The biggest one in America at that. It was often referred to as a warehouse for the mentally ill. Inside, patients were subjected to forced labor, shock therapy, and it was one of the first places in all of America to practice eugenics. In 1997, the asylum quickly closed its doors and was very hastily converted into a university. And that's what it remains today, except some of the parts are still around from the insane asylum. This week on my podcast, Heart Starts Pounding, I talked to someone who went inside the building and came face to face with something evil in the morgue. Click the link in my bio to hear it streaming exclusively on Amazon Music this week. And if you don't have a subscription, don't worry. Just click getamazonmusic.com/heartstartspounding for a free trial today. So some people blame Brittany Murphy's death on her house being haunted. And some people blame her house being haunted on Britney Spears. Let's take a deeper look. This is the house that Britney Spears lived in the early 2000s with Justin Timberlake. Apparently one night after a weekend of partying, she had a Reiki healer come and do a private session. But after he left, Britney Spears thought that he had opened a portal inside of her home while he was there. And now evil spirits were coming out of the portal and trying to push her down the stairs. Terrified, she moved out of the house. And who should move in next but Brittany Murphy, who was reportedly also terrified of the home. In December of 2009, Brittany Murphy passed away inside of the home under very mysterious circumstances. She developed extremely bad pneumonia out of nowhere. And people were quick to blame her husband for potentially poisoning her, except that he passed away 5 months later from the exact same thing. Theories surrounding the death range from toxic mold to hantavirus to spirits that came from the portal that Britney Spears' Reiki healer opened. But we're talking about all sorts of haunted homes on here, so make sure you follow along. This place was built just to live out the dark fantasies of its creator. on some unsuspecting guests. It's H.H. Holmes's Hotel of Horrors. So Holmes moved to Chicago in the late 1800s so that he could open a hotel for the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. Apparently he was a hit amongst the ladies, even though I don't see it, but I guess it was slim pickings amongst those that didn't die of tuberculosis in their youth. And this hotel was full of nefarious instruments. Down in the basement there was an incinerator that was person-sized. He had a chute that went from a windowless room all the way down to the basement. There were rooms that were either completely sealed or had too many doors in order to confuse guests. Guests would often complain about their doors being jiggled at night as if someone was trying to get in their room. And as the hotel was being built, workers would constantly complain about H.H. Holmes's weird behavior. There were reports that he would ask people working on the hotel if they were willing to kill another worker for him, and if they said no, he would fire them. And this, children, is why we need unions. Not to mention a shocking number of women were disappearing from the hotel. So this is the part of the video where you get to guess what he was doing in there, and we're gonna say it together on the count of 3. Ready? 1, 2, 3, skeleton harvesting. That's right, he was harvesting skeletons to sell to a local medical school. This only lasted for 2 years until he was found and convicted of murder, but some reports say he killed up to 200 people in there, mostly women. Some people also believe that he was Jack the Ripper, but that is for another video. Anyways, we're gonna talk about more scary Holmes later, bye! This carnival act became a killer. This is the tragedy of Lobster Boy. So Grady Stiles was born with a deformity that made his hands and feet look like lobster claws. It's called ectrodactyly, and you can see he doesn't have middle fingers. This was actually really common in his family. So common, they actually opened up their own circus. But outside of the circus act, Grady was incredibly violent towards his family. So much so that there's actually a story of during a fight with his wife, he was able to somehow pull out her IUD. I hate that I read that. So in 1978, his daughter Donna starts dating this guy Jack, and that's when things turned deadly. The night before they were to be married, Jack went to see Grady in hopes of getting his approval of their marriage. But Grady met Jack with a shotgun and took his life. The prisons at the time actually weren't able to accommodate disabled people, so he just got 15 years of probation. And his reign of terror actually continued until his wife put a hit out on him and hired their 17-year-old neighbor to do it. And Grady was killed after serving no time for any of his crimes, and his wife got 12 years in jail and the neighbor got 27. A 5,000-year-old Spanish Stonehenge has just emerged, and it's all thanks to climate change. So Spain is having a terrible drought right now, and part of the Valdecañas reservoir has dried up. And in the area that has dried up, this stone structure has been found. It's officially known as the Dolmen of Guadaparal, and very little is known about who constructed it or why. Many archaeologists believe that it's a tomb due to the fact that remains have been found nearby. They also believe that the rocks that are standing upright probably had other rocks on top of them, kind of making a table shape. Dolmens are actually pretty common, but we still have really no idea what they were for. Some have evidence that they were tombs, while others just contain animal bones and pottery. So I'm very curious to see what else is found at this site. This is one of the worst experiments ever conducted in the United States on people. It's the Tuskegee experiment. In 1932, 600 black men were recruited for a study in Alabama by being promised free medical care. 399 of these men were suffering from syphilis, a common STI, and the study promised medical care for the rest of their lives. But that's not what happened. Secretly, the study was designed to track the full progression of the infection, meaning that the subjects were not given real medicine. Instead, they were given aspirin and mineral substances. The progression of syphilis is terrible, and many men in the study went blind and insane. Meanwhile, researchers were watching this happen and did not intervene. Probably the worst part of this entire study was that in 1943, while the study was going on, penicillin became the most common cure of syphilis, but because it would have interrupted the study, none of the men were given it. The study was shut down in 1972, but at that point, many men had already lost their lives. President Bill Clinton formally apologized for the study in 1997, but for many, it was too little too late. The new Winnie the Pooh horror trailer just dropped. Let's take a look.
You know, you're the first person I ever shown this place to.
And why am I so special?
Because soon we'll be Christopher and Mary Robin.
Okay,
You
Christopher
should be
Robin.
close now.
We're not going to find them.
We will.
That's
Pooh, Piglet,
spooky.
Eeyore.
Okay.
We were friends for many years, and they're out there.
Christopher, we need to leave.
R.I.P. Eeyore.
Now.
I really need to find out what's happened there, okay?
No, you don't. You should probably leave. Abandoned by Christopher Robin. Oh my god. Oh my god.
This place is kind of
This
cool. And
insane.
It has a pool.
No. No.
We need to go. There's...
No. No.
Laura, stay.
Oh my god.
There's someone else outside. What was that?
Stop. This is my childhood. This is my childhood. No.
We used to be friends. Why are you doing this, please?
We
I would
used to
have
be
never
friends.
left that sweater. I swear.
Is this what the world has come to? Winnie the Pooh, blood and honey. And then they're mixing the blood and honey. I'm gonna go see it. I'm gonna go see it. I'm gonna sit through it, every single minute of it, probably twice. This is insane, but this is the kind of stuff that I love.